we are receiving a lot of requests for VPAT services. And when I talk to clients, they are particularly interested in how fast we can turn around the ACR. And so I've captured this recent trend in a new blog post titled "Our VPAT Requests Are Through the Roof and Clients Need Them Fast." So we're going to work through this blog post and I'm going to explain what's happening in accessibility services right now. And by the way, these clients are not only based in the US, we're seeing international interest in VPATs. So, what's happening, and I've heard this directly from clients, is that they are now receiving demands from their clients and their customers for VPATs. So, whereas before it was more of an informal arrangement, the client might ask about accessibility, now they are insisting upon documentation. So before we continue, if you're unfamiliar with the difference between a VPAT and an ACR, VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. So the VPAT itself is literally the template. So all you're getting here is the document. You can download that right now off the ITIC website. But an ACR is actually what you're after because an ACR is where all of the information is completed. So you'll have all of the relevant details for the VPAT, and then you'll have the material portion as well, where you have the accounting of the accessibility of the product or service. And that's going to, when you have all of that information and the VPAT is completed, then you will have the ACR. So that's what most people are after, but the terms are used interchangeably in the marketplace. So we're happy to provide the documentation for our clients. And so the process here is very simple. So I always tell clients, look, first let's determine what VPAT edition you want to use. And usually they go with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines edition, but of course there are multiple editions. We then conduct an audit of the digital asset, so whatever it is. And then recently, by the way, it's been mostly dynamic web apps, but we've also had requests for learning platforms. But whatever it is, it could be a web app, a mobile app, software, etc. We're going to audit the digital asset, and then we're going to take those audit results, and then we're going to fill in the material portion of the VPAT. And then we'll also fill in the other details that are required in the VPAT. And then we deliver the ACR to you along with the audit report. Now, that's an important value add that might not always be a default with some digital accessibility companies. I think most will also provide the audit report, but that really is something that you should get along with the ACR documentation, because if there are any accessibility issues, the audit is going to help you locate and identify those issues and then give you, hopefully, optimally recommendations on how to fix those issues. Now, ideally, any ACR won't have accessibility issues in it because that will be the accessibility status of your digital asset. But of course, just because there are a few accessibility issues, it doesn't mean that the client or customer is going to reject your product. It just means that that's the current state of accessibility. And if you want to improve that, you can always work on accessibility, work on remediation, and then go back to the provider and request another ACR. So that's always on the table. And what I tell clients when I'm talking to them is like, hey, if you have the time, you might want to receive the audit, work on remediation, and then we go back and we re-audit, and then you go ahead with the ACR after you remediated. As I've said, the time is of the essence in a lot of these recent requests. So some clients are just like, hey, I know there might be some accessibility issues, but we actually just need to have the VPAT issued by a third-party provider because that's what our client is asking for. So that's another part of this that I need to go back and update this blog post. That's another part of this is that the client requests are not only for the documentation, but that the documentation is coming from an independent third-party provider. So that's another part of this. That's actually a big part of this. And so the audit, of course, is something valuable information that your digital team can leverage. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of confusion about VPATs. You know, sometimes people think of them as certification, and they can be in a way, but it's really just going to speak to your current your product's current accessibility status. So whatever that is, then that's going to be reflected in the ACR. So that's why, again, the timing can really help clients, depending if they have that extra time. But even if not, sometimes it's just the ACR that's required. And so then the client just needs to provide the ACR. And it doesn't, just because there are accessibility issues, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the product won't be selected, because other products are working through accessibility as well. And so, it just depends on the niche. It might be more difficult, depending on what your product is and how unique your product is. But that's a part of this. So these are the requests that are happening right now. And again, it's been a lot of web apps and then also learning platforms that we've seen demand for. But this is how I wanted to add this section, because I think this is helpful for not only clients, but then other accessibility professionals to know what is in demand right now. And I in November, I noticed that it's not just audits now, it's VPATs. So VPATs are going to stack on audits, and it's going to be a marginal additional cost, but it is very helpful to have that document. And if you are getting the audit, it's a good value add to go ahead and get the ACR. Now, one other point here is that VPATs are not really for websites. They can be. Websites can be rolled up in the product or service, but usually it's more. Think of VPAT. Think of a VPAT as traditionally for a native mobile app or a web app or software. That's the best way to think about when a VPAT becomes relevant. But again, websites, if they are a part of the product or service, they can be included in the ACR. So I will include a link to the blog post in the description, as well as more information on our pricing for audits and VPAT services. So I will include all of that in the description.